striking similarities of certain Bible prophecies with the dirty, dark nature of the United Nations, the almighty, all-powerful, international, intergovernmental organization that today has more power and influence in each and every country than the respective presidents of those countries. This organization, this intergovernmental, international, mighty institute, which has its own army even, did you know this organization fits into certain Bible prophecies in a striking way? And when we look into the agendas and purposes, stated agendas, stated purposes of this organization, we cannot fail to see the amazing similarities about the future one world government and the aspirations of the United Nations as the intergovernmental or international institute of the world. Now, in this episode, I want to quickly dive into this together with you, and I want to draw your attention to some of the most striking Bible prophecies. Also, I want to dig a little deep into the background of this organization, why and how it was started, what and how it operates and what it does these days, and what are the aspirations for future of this organization. Again, I'm gonna put it back to back with certain Bible prophecies so that you can see what we are dealing with, what we have at hands these days in the name of the United Nations is actually a striking, there's a striking similarity, there's a striking description in the Bible for this institution. So now, I want to start with how this organization or intergovernmental institution was started. It goes all the way back to the First World War. During the First World War, there was a secret agreement, secret meeting, series of secret meetings and an agreement between France and the UK concerning the Middle East. They wanted to carve up the Middle East and take certain portions respectively for each other, but they couldn't do it on their own because at that time the Middle East was governed by the Ottoman Empire, which was a strong ally of Germany. So they needed another ally that can stand with them against the Ottomans. So they pulled the Russians in. They heavily relied on the great Russian army, but that time was overlapping, that time period was overlapping with the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. Nevertheless, they managed to sign Russia up for this. Russia joined, and therefore the Middle East was going to be divided into between these three superpowers of that time. Respectively, they were going to take certain portions for themselves. This was a secret agreement between France and the UK, and Russia was allowed in and given a portion there, as I said. But when the Bolshevik Revolution happened, and the Bolsheviks who took over the Russian government decided to pull out of the war, or they were considering to pull out of the war, British and the French realized they will not win the battle without another ally. And they needed to sign up, they needed to bring in other people to join their cause. So they made promises to the Arabs that live in the region. And they encouraged the Arabs to start their own revolt against the Ottoman Empire, while the British and the French are keeping the Ottomans and the Germans busy in the First World War. Even that wasn't enough to overcome the German and Ottoman coalition. Then, after this, the British went and tried to get Americans into the war. But to be able to get Americans into the war, where the American president was very strongly opposing to join this war, they realized that if they can convince the Jewry in America through American Jewry they can maybe get American government into the war. To be able to do that, they promised the same land which they had promised to the Arabs. They promised the same pieces of land to the Jews. There came the Balfour Declaration. In the Balfour Declaration, the British government promised exactly the same pieces of land which they had earlier promised to the Arabs as their free land. Now they're promising the same land to the Jews. And there, actually, by doing so, they created most of the problems we have today. But at the same time, by doing so, their immediate motivation to do that was to bring, through American Jewry, to bring Americans into the war as an ally of France and the UK. Well, they succeeded in that, and they won the First World War. But they created a new problem. Both the Arabs and the Jews now have been given promises by the Allied forces to occupy the same pieces of land. By doing so, they also fulfilled the Bible prophecy. The Bible prophecy that said in one day Israel is going to be born as a nation after nearly 2,000 years of being exiled all over the world. They didn't know perhaps what they were doing, but they gave the license to the Jews to go to their ancient promised land and establish themselves as an independent state. Jews have been waiting for this day for 2,000 years. And they came, my friends, they came, as you know, Jews came, and in 1948, Jews became an independent nation. Of course, the secret agreement between France and Italy took place in 1916 during the First World War. But eventual declaration of independence of Israel in the Middle East took place in 1948, nearly 30 years after this declaration. And together with it, a new conflict emerged in the Middle East: the Arabs and the Jews. Arabs were promised the same land. Did you know, as a result of the things that happened during the First World War, 5 most powerful nations of the world came together and established the organization that we know today as the United Nations, namely UK, France, Russia, and China, and the USA. So these 5 nations, after they formed the United Nations, they originally formed the United Nations to further their own national interests on the global scale without having to fight wars. Now, originally this was only for the interests of these 5 founding original permanent members. As I said, UK, France, USA, Russia, and China. In the following years, the United Nations began to allow other countries to join in on a temporary 2-year membership. And today, throughout the many years that passed, the UN has shifted a little bit this way and that way, but certain things never change in the UN. Still to this day, those 5 permanent members are the only ones who can meet secretly without the attendance of the other members. And they have an ability to cancel any resolution by 1 veto. The other nations don't have such a power. But these 5 nations also have has a vantage position in the United Nations to pursue their national interests from a vantage point in the congregation of the nations that today we know as UN. Today, the United Nations website, if you go check them, you will be greeted at their website with this phrase. It says, peace, dignity, and equality on a healthy planet. But then, if you go and read the reports about the performance of United Nations operations all over the world, you will be confronted with a completely different picture. Country after country, place after place, operation after operation. Almost everywhere UN forces has entered in the recent decades. Human trafficking, sex trafficking, child abuse, corruption. These things are in incredibly high levels being operated by the so-called UN peacekeepers. These things are done by the UN peacekeepers. So actually, in reality, the critics of the UN, the people who have been, even the lawmakers, even people who are very well educated and very well connected in monitoring what UN doing, they've been raising this alarm, they've been blowing this whistle for decades already, that the UN is not fulfilling its so-called statement of bringing peace and dignity, helping people to be elevated from human abuse. Instead, UN is doing exactly the opposite through its agents. Now, recently, if you've been watching the news, the Israeli government has uncovered and put forward on the media all the facts how the certain UN agents in the Middle East has been channeling millions of dollars to terrorist organizations in the Middle East to work towards the elimination, destruction, wiping off the Jewish nation. Hamas and Hezbollah have been funded and supported by UN workers and UN money and UN immunity for decades. These are now known facts. Anybody can just go with few clicks on your cell phone, on your computer, you will find these information freely available to you. But is this a new thing? No. UN from its very beginning have never been friendly with Israel. Even the Balfour Declaration that was given to the Jews by one of the founding members of UN, the so-called Britain or the UK, was only a gimmick, was only a lie, was only a deception to lure the Jewish people to believe in the promise of the Britain and thereby pressurize the American government so that the Americans will join the war and defeat the Ottomans and the Germans in the First World War. This was only a gimmick. It was never meant to be fulfilled, because the same piece of land they also promised to the Arabs. That is the reason why to this day Arabs even make a claim on the same land. But of course, if you know the Bible and the history, you will know that there is even a deeper background story to the land conflict in the Middle East. This story of the land conflict in the Middle East goes all the way back to the days of Abraham. All the way back to the days in which God promised Abraham that I will give you this land and your descendants will occupy this land and your children will be as many as the sand of the sea, as many as the sand on the sea, stars of the sky. So you see, this conflict is an ancient conflict, but it's a biblical conflict. What is so striking for me is the slogan of UN. From the beginning, UN never was interested in bringing peace, dignity, equality on a healthy planet. It was from the beginning a gimmick by the most powerful 5 countries to manipulate and to misuse and to coerce the other nations of the world according to their national agendas. It was set up for that, and it worked for that for all these decades, and it continues to serve that purpose to this day. So one needs to understand what we are dealing with when we look at UN. But did you know there is a foreshadow of UN in the Bible? The Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel was also built with the same purpose, to create a global infrastructure of all the nations of the world, of all the peoples of the world, under one government. Now recently, some of the critiques of the UN has come up and said, UN's agenda and purposes are nothing to do with peace and harmony or equality or human rights, but UN essentially is aspiring and working towards a one world government where people's freedoms have no place. Also, the same critics come up and say UN actually is secretly working towards reducing human population to a controllable number. Now, these critics are coming from people, from scholars and researchers who have been for years analyzing UN activities, UN spending, UN projects. On the front, UN has, did you know, on the front, UN has a Human Rights Watch. But they put on the chairmanship of the Human Rights Watch a country like Iran, who is the greatest violator of all human rights. They put Saudi Arabia on the chairmanship position of UN Women, who is one of the biggest violators of women's rights in the world today. So, as I just mentioned, this same UN has been supporting and sponsoring anti-Israeli terrorist organizations, anti-Jew, anti-Semitic organizations, whose sole purpose is to wipe Israel off the map. You see, this organization is not what it claims himself to be. It has a face which is very different than its real, true character. Now, where in the Bible we meet this institution, this intergovernmental organization? As I said, there is a foreshadow, the Tower of Babel that was built to bring people together so that they could control all the people of the world in a rebellion against God, in an effort to raise a human kingdom, one world government in a rebellion against God. And we can clearly see UN favors anyone but two people group all over the world. It is a known fact. The most favorite objectives, the most favorite causes for the UN over the past decades have been, as long as you are not a Christian and a Jew, you are on the good books of UN. No matter what you do, they will support you. But if you dare to stand up for biblical values, if you dare to stand up for the Jewish nation, you will find them standing against you. It is a known fact for decades. Now, there is another passage in the Bible that is strikingly describing the narrative of UN and how the UN has operated in the past decades and continues to operate this day. That is Psalm 2. Psalm 2 says, "Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their bonds in pieces and cast away their cords from us." Now, if you go read the critics of the UN, you will discover very quickly, if you just do a very quick search on YouTube, on Google, you will discover very quickly that it is now a known fact that UN is obsessed with issuing decrees and decisions in condemnation of the nation of Israel year after year after year. In fact, it is a fact that there is no other country, there is no other event or incidents for which UN has issued more condemnation than the nation of Israel. No matter what the nation of Israel does, UN will condemn them. For example, I'll give you one of the most ridiculous condemnations that UN has made. In the recent years, even after the great terrorist attack, which is the worst terrorist attack in our lifetime, which is the worst crime committed against Jewish people after the Holocaust. In the wake of that, UN could not condemn this terrorist for days until there was international pressure. But rather, they were very quick to condemn the Israeli people because they dared to defend themselves. This is the UN we are talking about. All along the time, they are channeling millions and millions of dollars that are actually coming from the taxation of the people who live in the countries that are part of the UN. And those monies are channeled to these organizations to wipe out the Jews. This is the UN that sits together, These are the kings of the earth, as Psalm 2 says. They sit together and take counsel together to wipe out God's people. It is also a known fact that UN does not only pass resolutions in condemnation of Jewish people more than anything else, but also the Jewish people, the Israeli diplomats, whenever they go to UN meetings, they get bullied there. They get mistreated there. They are subjugated to verbal harassing by the other dignitaries of other countries. And in the UN premises, it's a free reign for anyone who hates Jews. So this is, my friends, when I look at the UN, when I read the facts, I cannot stop but think about Psalm 2. It perfectly fits the prophecy of Psalm 2. But no matter what, if you keep reading the rest of Psalm 2, God says, God looks at them and God laughs at them. Because no matter how hard they try, no matter how hard they try to present themselves as the angel of light, but they are actually a global instrument of the devil himself. Can you see what I see here? They present themselves as the angel of the light. Go look at the UN website. Just go to UN website, un.org, and read it yourself. They present themselves as the angel of light. They say they are the only hope for humanity on earth. They're going to bring peace and dignity to all the people of the world. But all along the time, every country where they operate, they rape children, they do sex trafficking, they do money laundering, they support terrorists, but they bring dignity and peace to the world. Hey, that's what they claim. They promised this institution that was started by the 5 founding countries. Britain promised the same piece of land to the Arabs and then to the Jews. But by doing so, they pit the Jews and the Arabs against one another for decades to come. Now, no wonder why BBC loves to support the terrorist cause and break down the Jewish cause. Because they actually never really wanted to give the land to the Jews. It was only a gimmick to get Americans involved in this war, in that war at that time. This is showing me again what a filthy world we are living in, what a corrupt world we are living in. This is just from the pit of hell. Corruption like you cannot imagine. And corruption and deception at such a level that millions of people's blood are being shed since the days this wicked demonic organization is established by the decisions and condemnations and resolutions and by even the soldiers of this very organization. And all along the time, this organization is finding its money and energy from the monies of the taxpayers in the respective countries that subscribe to UN. This is the best example of the UN is the best foreshadow of the global kingdom that one day the Antichrist is going to establish. I am convinced that UN is the foreshadow of what the Antichrist is going to do. Imagine what UN is doing and multiply it 100 times. That's what the Antichrist is going to do. But in the middle of that, the Bible says God looks at them in Psalm 2. God looks at them and laughs at them. Let me read the rest of it from Psalm 2, from verse 4. He who sits in the heaven shall laugh. The Lord shall hold them in derision. Then he shall speak to them in his wrath and distress them in his displeasure. Yet I have set my king on my holy hill Zion. Can you see what I'm reading? God looks at what the UN is doing, all the corrupt rulers and politicians of UN is doing. God laughs at them, and God says, you can do whatever you want. I put my king, my holy one, as the king of the world on Zion, on Israel, on Jerusalem. And he's coming. He's coming. One day he's going to come. He's going to destroy UN or whatever else it will be called when Jesus comes. This global plot of the Satan, he's going to destroy it. And he's going to establish one Jewish global kingdom. and he's going to rule the world from Jerusalem for 1,000 years. We know this for sure because it is in the Bible. Therefore, I pledge my allegiance to the King of Kings, Jesus Christ, to the King of the Jews, to the King of heaven and earth, to the King of Jerusalem. I pledge my allegiance unto him. And when he comes, there will be peace between the Arabs and the Jews. There will be peace all over the world. Not like the fake peace of the UN, not like the corruption of the UN. True peace, true peace, true dignity, true upliftment, true quality in life, and the planet will be a healthy place. You see, what the devil promises to the world with the UN is only a fake promise. But what the devil delivers through UN is really what the devil does. To kill, steal, to lie, to coerce people, to bully nations. That is what they do. Because they are only an agent of the devil himself. I hope this video opens your eyes and is a blessing to you. Please subscribe to our channel, like, share our comments. And if this ministry is a blessing to you, please support us with your donations so that we can continue to do this great work. God bless you and goodbye.